Yes, today continuation, part 10. Those called Phoenicians are supposed to be the inventors of the alphabetic writing, whereas according to the Talmud, Moses was its inventor. Moreover, we have already shown in this book that from the Greek alphabet, a rhymed verse having a definite unified meaning in Hebrew has been derived. The period of the appearance of the alphabetic writing among the Israelites is identical with the period when this writing is considered to appear among those called Phoenicians. The names of Phoenician settlements are identical to those of Israelite cities. Scholars have treated each sphere and subject separately and explained the identities and similarities by claiming that the Israelite people imitated and borrowed from the Phoenicians Canaanite. But is there another instance in history where one nation borrowed from and limited another nations so completely in all phases of its life and culture? This is not just an imitation of external forms, but is an imitation in every tiny detail and a minute, including of historical event and their date. We have seen that the Exodus occurred in 1446 BC and the Israelites in the Amarna period conquered the whole land of Canaan, including the region of Sidon and Tyre, which afterwards became known as Phoenicia. This conquest must have brought about political and social changes in the region, which are reflected in the changes cited above, writing names, judges, and also the appearance of Phoenician culture. It thus becomes necessary to draw a demarcation line separating the Canaanite period from the Phoenician. Clearly, Canaanites, Amorite are not Phoenicians. It should be borne in mind that the name Phoenicians appears for the first time in history after the Amarna period, and there is no basis whatever to link Canaanite with Phoenicians. Hecataeus' statement that Phoenicia was formerly called Cuna, along with Philo Biblius' statement that Cuna, who was afterward called Phoenix, brings out this change, assembling all the data and treating it as a whole and not as separate items, lead one to the inevitable conclusion that Phoenicians was the name given to the Israelite by the Greeks. And moreover, there is reason to believe that Herodotus includes the Israelite under the name Phoenicians. Diodorus Siculus is referring to the origins of the Jewish nation, regards them as part of those Phoenicians who did not sell with Cadmus to Greeks. The book of Maccabees refers to the Spartans, Lacedaemonians, who are known to be related to the Phoenicians as the sons of Abraham and brothers to the Jews. We have seen and discussed the political and religious development within the Israelite nation, a development which led to a political rift and the formation of the Judean nation from within the Israelite one, while the name Phoenicia, which at first was given by the Greeks to the whole Israelite nation, remained attached only to the rejected part. 10 tribes. In the course of time, the Judean nation expanded and its borders extended as far as Carmel, Acre. The name Phoenicia then was applied only to the coastal strip between Carmel and Aradus. Here most likely is the answer and explanation for Raymond Wells' astonished question, how is it that the term Phoenicia gradually narrowed down geographically? Here we have concrete evidence from a leading Jewish scholar's work that the 10 tribes, Israelite, and the Phoenicians are one and the same people. The researcher strongly encourages the readers to study and all Dr. Gainer's fact in his online book as given in the line here in the footnote. Did the Hebrew arrive 1500 plus years before Columbus in America? The 500th anniversary of Columbus' voyage of discovery of Spain to what was not then known as the New World in 1492 was celebrated in 1992. Of course, there were those who manipulatedly celebrate this event to underline the Hispanic as opposed to the Anglo-Saxon element in American culture and society. It is becoming an increasingly well-known and documented fact that not only were there North Europeans on the American continent long before the voyage of Columbus, but also that Phoenicians, whom we have now proved to the Israelite, and whom we will from now on call Israelite, Phoenician for clarity, sailed from the Middle East through the Mediterranean and across the Atlantic to these shores centuries before 1 CE commenced. Archaeological and epigraphic evidence are hardcore fact, and no scientific scholar can reason them away. One such place in the USA is a site at Los Lunas near Albuquerque. Here is physical evidence of a rock with the Ten Commandments carved in the ancient script, which we will discuss later. Many learned intellectuals have written books on this mystery, to mention a few. Saga, America and America BC by Professor Dr. Barry Fell of Harvard University. Before Columbus by Professor Dr. Cyrus H. Gordon. They all discovered America by Charles Bolland. The key, a startling inquiry into the riddle of man's past by Professor Dr. John P. Kohane of the University of Pennsylvania, and many more. Before we continue, the researcher would like to share a brief background on some of those remarkable individuals mentioned. Professor Dr. Barry Fell. Professor Dr. Professor Dr. Fell was born in Lewes, Sussex, England, and was a grandson of the railway engineer and inventor John Brackenhoff Fell. He moved with his mother to New Zealand in the early 1920s. After his father, who was a merchant seaman, died in a shipboard fire, he returned to the British Isles for graduate work, receiving his PhD at the University of Edinburgh in 1941. Fell then served with the British Army during World War II. In 1946, he returned to New Zealand, where he resumed his academic career and lectured in zoology at the Victoria University of Wellington. A world authority on fossil sea urchins, he was recruited by Harvard University in 1964 and immigrated to the United States to join the staff of the Museum of Comparative Zoology at Harvard, where he worked until retirement in 1979. He died in San Diego, California at the age of 77. Tao Fell was an accomplished marine biologist at Harvard University. He is best known for 3 books which claim that many centuries before Christopher Columbus reached America, the Celts, Basques, Phoenicians, Egyptians, and others were visiting North America already. His interest in inscriptions began early in his career with the study of Polynesian petroglyphs, published in 1940, but his most famous work came much later, starting in 1976 with his publication of America BC, in which he proposed translation of inscriptions found on rock surfaces and artifacts in North and South America, which he believed to be written in Old World script and language. He followed up this work in 1980 with his saga America and in 1982 with Bronze Age America. Professor Dr. Fell's epigraphic work was not well received by the academia, who protect their own ideologies and already published books they cited in 1978. Thus, the argument of America BC are unconvincing. Professor Dr. Cyrus H. Gordon. Professor Dr. Cyrus H. Gordon was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the son of Lithuanian immigrant and physician Benjamin Gordon. He was raised in an upper-class Jewish family with a particular emphasis on devotions to Jewish learning, rational thinking, as well as an openness to secular learning. As a scholar, he made his primary contributions as one of the few great Semiticists to come out of the United States, and that was because he followed an education track typical of elite European philological scholars. Gordon began studying Hebrew at age 5 and became interested in both Greek and Latin as a young child. Gordon took his BA, MA, and PhD at the University of Pennsylvania and also took courses at both nearby Gratz College and Dropsy College. These 3 institutions had specialized programs in the Bible, classics, and ancient Near East, all of which contributed to Gordon's historical philological bent. At these universities, Gordon studied Old Persian and Sanskrit as well. As an American Scholar of Oriental Research, ASOR, fellow Gordon spent the first half of the 1930s in the Near East, working out of both the Baghdad and Jerusalem centers. Gordon dug with Leonard Uri at the UR and worked with Flinders Petrie at Tel El Ajil. He worked with Professor Dr. W. F. Albright at Tel Beit Mersim and accompanied Nelson Grueck on his explorations in Transjordan. He was involved in the examination and the translation of the Egyptian Tel El Amarna tablet while with the JDS Pendlebury expedition. Despite this impressive pedigree, when Gordon returned to the U.S. in 1935, he was unable to find a permanent academic position, primarily due to the Depression, but also because of academic anti-Semitism. Therefore, he took a series of temporary positions at the Johns Hopkins University under Albright, at Smith College, and at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. Not afraid of scholarly controversy, Gordon challenged traditional theories about Greek and Hebrew cultures. As the researcher is doing in this research series. In the 1960s, he declared his examination of Minoan Cretan text corroborated his long-held theory that Greek and Hebrew culture stemmed from a common Semitic heritage, Danite influence. He asserted that this culture spanned the eastern Mediterranean from Greece to Palestine during the Minoan era. Gordon's student Michael Arthur published the most comprehensive treatment of this controversial thesis in his monumental Heleno-Semitica, an ethnic and cultural study in Western Semitic impact of Mediterranean Greece, 1965. Gordon also held that the Jews, Phoenicians, ten tribes, and others crossed the Atlantic in antiquity, ultimately arriving in both North and South America. This opinion was based on his own work on the Bat Creek inscription found in Tennessee and on the transcriptions of the alleged Paraíba inscription from Brazil, as well as his assessment of the Lost Lunas Decalogue stone, discussed further below. Gordon was friend of Professor Dr. John P. Cohen and wrote a preface to Cohen's book, The Key, a startling inquiry into the riddle of man's past. He was supportive of many of Cohen's theories. Professor Dr. Cyrus Gordon's claims have also been criticized by mainstream traditional archaeologists. Professor Dr. John Philip Cohen, Professor Okay, I'm gonna do a Professor Dr. John Philip Cohen next with a part 11. The part 10 is over now. For now. Okay, thank you.